Before we get into this review, I just want to say a few words about a friend of mine who has passed away. Paul, aka Buckaroobanzai, was a huge fan of jungle exploitation movies. You may know him as Buckaroobanzai here on YouTube. He was a big contributor to this channel and sadly passed away earlier this month, July 2021. Paul and I had talked about reviewing ULTIMAX FORCE prior to his passing, and it was actually one we had kind of planned to do later on this year. Sadly, we never got round to it due to obviously Paul's untimely passing. But I decided to review this movie and dedicate it in memory of Paul, my fallen friend. So rest in peace, and let's talk about ULTIMAX FORCE. ULTIMAX FORCE is a 1987 low-budget Filipino exploitation movie, also known as Ruckus 2. It was directed by Willie Milan, who has directed a hell of a lot of Filipino exploitation kind of action movies and stars largely a cast of unknowns. In fact, our four members of this kind of ULTIMAX FORCE Ninja Squad have never had any other credits on IMDb. They're headed up by Arnold Nicholas, who plays Chris Burton, who is our leader of this team of ninja commandos. So what's the story? Well, this takes place a while after the end of the Vietnam conflict. We don't know exactly how long, but it can't be too long, as the character of Chris Burton is clearly not very old. He's clearly in his like 20s or something, and he was a sergeant in Vietnam and is now working as a ninja. Yes, this is a little bizarre, so just bear with me. And there is this kind of ninja club, sect, whatever you want to call it, that seems to be operating out of California. And they have been contacted by one of their brethren's sister, who believes that her brother is still being held captive by the Vietnamese in Vietnam after the end of the Vietnam conflict. So the leader of this ninja clan decides he's going to send a group of ex-military types who are also members of this ninja clan to try and extract this particular kind of guy and any other American POWs that happen to be there. So that is the plan. So these four ninja commandos jet off to Vietnam, maybe have a couple of kind of allies that help along the way, and lots of jungle action ensues. What'll happen? Well, you'll have to watch the movie to find out. So let's discuss what I think works in this movie. This is for a certain type of audience, let's be honest with you. Now, the 80s in moviedom were famous for a couple of things. And one of those things were ninja movies. Ninjas were all the rage in the 80s, and we had a variety of ninja films. We also had quite a few Vietnam films come out in the 80s as well. So why not mash these two genres together and create this kind of super B-movie of ninjas in Vietnam? And there have been a couple of other kind of like more silly Vietnam-based movies as well. So why not? So the concept is obviously pure B-movie schlock. And obviously this is not going to be for anyone who wants a realistic portrayal of military action within the Vietnam. It's not going to be in this movie, let's just say that. But if you like exploitation movies, if you like high body counts, if you like large petrol explosions, then this movie will offer all of those things. So what do I think also adds to that? What works in this movie? It is a low budget film, so we do have to bear that in mind, but I will say there are some pretty good stunt works on display here. In particular, we get a scene where we're kind of first introduced to our ninjas when they're on a kind of a training mission fighting other ninjas. And that's probably the most you'll see of actual martial arts within the movie, but the stunt work is pretty good. As I've mentioned, there's also quite a high body count, and there is lots of explosive action throughout the movie. The movie's actually quite well paced, never really kind of slowing down for too long before we get onto the next action sequence. I have to say as well, I didn't think the actual use of camera was too bad here. There were some pretty decent kind of shots that are kind of set up here by the director. So although it does look obviously very low budget, and obviously they're struggling in regards to things like location, nonetheless there is some fairly decent kind of shot composition here and there as well. The director, as I've mentioned, has a very kind of prolific stable of films under his belt, so obviously he has picked up some skills at this time, and it kind of does kind of show, because I do think there is some skill on display here in regards to some of the kind of the more technical elements. I have to say, the movie's climax is pretty interesting. It maybe doesn't go the way you think, and I actually think the ending was fairly strong. But let's be honest, obviously I can't in any way say this is a good film. I mean, you've heard the synopsis there, and that's just silly on its own. So yes, this is not a particularly kind of realistic film, and it's just mega hokey. But let's just look past the obvious kind of like schlock for a second, and maybe have a look at what else maybe I can say. I think the main problem here is that there's virtually no characterization. We're introduced to our 4 ninja commandos, and only one we ever get any kind of characterization, and that isn't really until kind of quite later on in the movie. Chris Burton, who is our main ninja, and we were introduced to them in this kind of training sequence, as I've mentioned, but we don't know anything about them. It literally, we see one shot of them each in a car, and then they're in this kind of like this training sequence with other ninjas who are dressed, you know, identically to them. So we're just watching a bunch of ninjas kick each other, and it's kind of like, I don't know any of these characters. None of them outside of the kind of the leader, and even then it's the barest minimum of characterization. We don't know anything about them, anything about their character. The story says in story that they don't know each other. They don't know this guy who they're trying to rescue. We don't know really why this ninja clan is necessarily going to Vietnam now. It's just a little bit kind of, the setup is a little weak, and that's obviously fairly obvious here. So once we get into Vietnam, there's a few kind of like double crosses and things like that through some nefarious characters, but again the characters are all kind of somewhat kind of weak. On a technical level, I think the music is quite bad. It's kind of like the typical kind of chirpy sort of soundtrack you'll get in a lot of these kind of like these foreign action films, coupled with some awful sound effects as well. The acting is pretty atrocious, as you'd probably expect. None of this cast has gone on to do anything else other than this movie, really. And the dialogue is completely kind of like hammy and ridiculous as well. Once we get into Vietnam, there's less of the kind of the martial arts kind of side of stuff, and it is just more kind of shooting. So you really wonder why they're bothering wearing their ninja kind of outfits, to be honest with you, when it ultimately becomes a military mission. This is obviously a very silly movie. It's kind of like a rinse and repeat. We have faceless kind of bad guys who just kind of line up to kind of get shot. We don't really have much in the way of real stakes, to be honest. Although there is something that happens towards the end of the movie that involves these kind of POWs, which I did think was actually ended up being somewhat of a dramatic movie, which I kind of quite liked. Yes, it's super silly. It's super hokey. It's a pure exploitation B movie, and this is the sort of thing you're probably going to expect if you watch this film. But it does have a certain amount of entertainment value. Like I've said, the action pretty much never really kind of lets up, and if you like ninjas and you like kind of war movies, then what more can you really ask? Yeah, it's kind of silly, but it's still kind of a fun, silly, and a schlocky B movie. I'll give this one a 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.